All right. Okay. Welcome. Good morning. How goes it? Today's top story. Just kidding. Is probably AMD. I mean, that's the big trade for me right now, but um, it got my mark at the diamond breakout. So, I hear less and less and less nowadays that TA doesn't work, but every now and then you still get those folks that are like, yeah, this doesn't work. Why are you doing this? And I had a lot of people who made pretty negative comments about um, some of that early stuff that I had posted about the things like diamond breakouts or whatever. And if it works, it works. I mean, when it's in the right setup, usually it's really, really efficient. And this is a very good example of that setup. I mean, pretty much nailed it in terms of the breakout target. So if you're not convinced, I don't know how else to convince you, but that breakout for that diamond was pretty simple, and the next wave went almost exactly right where you expect it to go. So it's a very, very good, simple way of trading the market sometimes. I don't think that it's always the best, but that diamond structure on the bottom had a really simple layout. It fell in line with a lot of other targets that we were looking at, and my target was basically right here at 117.23, and that's the target that was hit. So it did hit. I will say that I didn't exit all my position because even though like I'm happy it hit that, I really wanted to see an increase in the IV before I let the position go. And also because on the outside here, it's debatable whether or not this even holds. I think we could easily see how this could be like a UTAD kind of deal, or an upthrust, maybe not a UTAD. If it's not an SOS, it won't hold here above this top, and it would drop back through to fill the gap down to like 114. It doesn't kill the play, it just is delayed. So one of the things that I'm like thinking about is how this initial drop in usually represents kind of an anchor point for the overall move. And what I mean by that is that, like, if you were to measure out correctly, and it's sort of hard to do it right here because of the way this is set up, but if you were to measure it out correctly, it should go to the between the ears here. And you can see it's like kind of off, like, because there's a big wick down. I'm not really sure what to make of that just yet, but normally what I would suggest is that that's going to give you like a roughly 50-50 range. And so what you would then do is take it down to that middle. I'll make it a different color here. Let's make it like blue. Like that would be considered like the center mark. So from the drop down point to that center mark, this is just something I've noticed that a lot of times that cat ear represents a center build out. So between the ears, right, it represents kind of like a center build out. And so when you see that, you have basically like a center mark that you can then use. And so this drop down, I don't know if it's because of like operators who are just getting out of positions or moving around positions. I really don't know why mechanically this makes any sense. I know there was a gap here in this particular example on AMD, so you might suggest, well, it's just in getting to the gap, right? So that's easy. That's why the ears are there. That's fine. I'm not really talking about where to place the ears. I'm talking about the fact that after you do that, that initial drop often becomes like a swing measurement for the breakout. And weirdly, it almost always happens to be, you can see here, if you place it right on the low end, and I don't know if it's like perfect. I think I got it pretty darn close, but let me go ahead and snap. I don't know if I want to do that. Hang on. This got shifted around, so let me go ahead and snap so I make sure it's in the right spot. Yeah, so slightly lower, like right there. It almost always is at like a halfway distance. So like you can see like this translated over to here. Oops. Now looks like, oh, it's actually breaching, or it's actually shifting down the range to some degree. So that halfway point ends up being kind of a midway, and then for whatever reason, again, I'm not really sure I understand fully why this is. I have ideas like in my brain of what the supply and demand might be doing when this kind of thing happens. But on the whole, I think it's still pretty confusing. So when I look at it, I'm like, I know what happens here. So what I typically do is I measure it out, even if I'm like not able to fully explain it. This has been a very, very, very common pattern in the market. So especially like seeing how it happened on AMC and how consistent it was, I started just like, oh, I should take this to other tickers and see if it works. And it does. And so when I look at this, it's not so much that, I don't know if it's a great learning opportunity so much as it is something to just kind of keep in your back pocket. That you want to have like this idea of like, oh, if it drops down and this is where the cat ear is, and we're basically creating a range now. And I think it's very consistent. And so for the most part, I think it's very consistent. So when we look at that and we combine it with what else we were doing yesterday, which was we generated this downward channel, and then we generated a secondary downward channel, we noticed that there was a possibility, maybe even like a strong possibility, that what we experience going forward is essentially like a, basically like a build out. Actually, it was like the 50-50 right there. That's generating like two different possible channels. One is like really steep. There's a purple lines coming straight down here. The other is not quite as steep at all, and not nearly as narrow. And that's the ones that are kind of like this teal color. They're very light on my screen. Might even be a little bit hard to see. So when I look at this, I'm like not particularly fazed by what's happening here, because there was a diamond that hit the diamond breakout. It also now jumps over what would be considered like the steepest creek here. And so if this holds, my expectations are not necessarily that this like moonshots or anything just yet, but that this is still building out a range, and I would expect it to potentially get up to 119.29. So I don't think this move is over, and I'm like looking at it today like I don't think it's over yet. That 119.29 can then be, or 30 or whatever it is, can be checked and back tested and just kind of look at it and just say, okay, where is that in the past? And it is an important level, so it's consistent with everything else that's being built here. So my suggestion would be that perhaps, even though this is probably true, I had shifted this value down to here. This is really like telling you like, hey, we're going to go from A to B really in this top range. And that's one way to look at that, is just simply like, well, maybe it's like this move right here. So It's very possible today that AMD, and going into even Thursday into Friday, that AMD actually comes back down pretty low. I mean, I think you can get pretty close to that gap or gap fill. Doesn't have to happen. Just observationally, I think it could probably come as low as here, and get down to where that gap fill is, and then push right back out and have a pretty big move. So when I look at it from that perspective, it doesn't seem very confusing to me at all. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, because that would be the top of that range as well. So you're defining the range here in this initial auto reaction period. So this is the first auto, this is the second auto. Both go up to the cat ear 1 and then cat ear 2 here, the first one that was made. So really it's 2 and then 1, but you get what I'm saying. Push up, push up. So this particular move here generates like the actual trading range that is being built out. I find that to be a really easy way to understand the range being built, because traditionally, like, what you would be looking for is these levels, but you'd basically be kind of guessing when it comes to the middle here. Like, I don't know a better way other than maybe a fib retracement to sort of estimate how far back this comes. And it's probably a good fib retracement. I don't, again, know for sure what that is, but usually it makes sense. And it's a 0.5 fib retracement right here. So potentially, like, that's all there is to it. It's just a halfway point. From the top to the bottom here, it is the 0.5. So again, consistency. Like, the more you can do to build consistency in your trading habits, the more you do to build the patterning, and the more you can do to support that, the easier it becomes to trade, right? And this morning, as I'm looking at the market, a lot of the market's very red. And we had talked about quite extensively. We talked a little bit about, well, I say we talked a little bit quite extensively, but we did talk a lot about AMC yesterday. And I don't really want to go through the same things every single day. I've expressed this before. I'm more interested in making money than I am at this point than just charting AMCs. So I need to make sure that that's my priority. But I do have positions in AMC. I am still in this stock. I am still waiting for bigger moves. I'm not positive that this is what we're going to see. This was just an idea that we talked about yesterday, near the end of the day, and how you could basically manufacture a breakout without a breakout, that kind of thing. A lot of this stuff is still speculative. Like, I don't think that you can look at this and say that's definitely what's going to happen. Just like before, when we were talking about going up to the upside more immediately, you couldn't really say that was going to happen unless it broke out of the creek at like 365. And for what it's worth, you know, the folks that were in here that were really bullish, in my mind, like, they didn't do anything wrong by being really bullish. It's just that I thought they were being a little bit too gung-ho last week talking about this potential upside when it hadn't even broken out of the main downtrend. So you can see it very clearly on this other right screen here that AMC is still stuck in the downtrend. If it breaks out, I expect there's going to be a pretty decent rally move. The way things are going, I would not be surprised if it doesn't move until Monday. And one of the things that I have concern about is 390. I think it's very possible that you might get stuck at 390 and have to generate like a longer term breakout. And the desire there would be to trade low and high in this range that we didn't trade before. So you can see the way I have it like botched out, that there's obviously some things here that need to be worked out before you can assume that it's going to go way, way up. And while I do think that, yes, there is absolutely 100% a point of interest way up here at 460, I think the idea that a lot of people have that it has to just kind of rocket up is not really always the case. Like, we've had a lot of those instances where we've had those triggers that have pointed towards, hey, we're gonna make this move, but you don't actually take that advance, and then you end up coasting and going sideways or whatever. There's more than one way to cool off RSI. You know, the easy thing to do is say, well, it's historically oversold. Yeah, it is. But even still, like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take off and go to the moon. We've seen previously, like back here in January of 2024, it's a very similar setup in some ways. You go sell off right into January, just like we have here, a big sell off going into January. And this goes down to the 17th and it breaks down, goes all the way down to February 6th. And then we get this kind of rally back to the upside. And it's a whole month later, you're finally breaking down again, in a similar fashion. When we talk about the shift chart, which I haven't really mentioned recently in maybe the last couple of weeks, that shift chart still exists. And I don't think in my mind, it's not a question of like existing or not existing even at all. It's just there. It's like it's just a way of mathematically understanding the range we may be trading in terms of like value, right? And that's the idea behind it. It's not about, oh, this is where we really should be, la 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 la. It's more like comparing it to the way we were previously. This is kind of where we're trading right now. And it made a lot more sense of everything that's going on. It really did. There was a lot more consistency with some things like we talked about this hit over here and how it like coincided with a hit on this main creek coming down, things like that. And obviously like the gap values. And then historically, like where are we in the middle of this? You can see that this area that we traded in February of last year, which is now coming full circle. We basically back to where we were same time last year, but we're slightly lower. You're basically in the same exact zone. You're trading, if you look carefully at this, if you were to turn this sideways, what you would see is that it's swinging around this level right here, which is ultimately, like we talked about that 485 level and how important that was. It's pretty much that level, okay? You could maybe argue that it's more like 470 or something like that, or slightly lower. I don't really care. The point is that that's essentially like the previous all-time low in terms of value, okay? So again, not to confuse it with this is what the price really is. No, the price really isn't $10.28. The price is exactly what it says it is. But in fact, it would be confusing if you tried to say that because, again, like the chart has already endured so much shifting around that it'd have to be mathematically proven, in a different way than I'm doing it right here. The shift value really is like the best way for me to understand it. If this original value is not 1062 or 1028, but if this original value is back to 2 something, then that puts it into perspective that this would have been like 2 something in terms of value. And that's because of dilution. That's because of the introduction of ape, which was a massive, I don't know, it was a gateway to dilution, but in some ways it was also dilutive because they had diluted ape when ape existed. So there was dilution involved in that. And then you have like the inception of ape and then the reverse split and all that stuff. And there's all these little micro things that happen in there. You have a lot of like little bitty nuances all throughout this. My point being that like when you look at this from that point of view, this is really just and I could, again, doodle it like in a particular way to maybe make it a little bit easier to understand. Because I think that this gives it a different view when you kind of see it like, oh, if this is where you were trading, from the get-go and you didn't, see anything else and this is what you saw coming down, I think it would make perfect sense to us that the way this is traded, like logically, we're basically just splitting this guy in half and then trading the lower half. And so there's a problem in that you haven't actually traded below here very much at all. So that zone that we're talking about here, that we're talking about, well, we may need to trade here more. That might be a big part of this goal. It really makes sense when you look at it in light of what we've already traded, because we've traded this area on the bottom, on the floor, and then we have not traded anything like right below it, and then there's a little bitty gap, and then you trade even lower than that. There's nothing traded there either. So there's quite a bit of, I kind of did that backwards, but you get what I'm saying, because I'm like, this is already like heavily traded. This is not heavily traded. And so when I look at this, I'm like, okay, so if I had long-term saw this position from like a helicopter point of view, and I thought this was a smaller chart, like, so if I saw this and I thought this was not a 4-hour multi-year chart, but I thought this was just like a, a simple 3 or 4 days, right, of charting, and I saw something like that, I would kind of assume that the entry of these positions was being messed with over here, kind of like a reset button, and a chance to like reaccumulate maybe on a bottom that goes slightly lower. I would think of it as like a spring, probably, to some degree. Even if it's not like, in the end, not like a real true spring where you go all the way over the top, that's probably the way I would think about it. And or a, something of a kind of trend where you're on like a trend bottom, right? And then later on, you're going to go up back towards the trend top, which is over here somewhere. So on and so forth, okay? And these are things that, like, we'll talk about that some other time when we get there, but these are things that would make sense to me then, that you would eventually come back up here and so on, yada, yada, yada. That's February 2026. That's what we've been talking about all along. So when I look at this, I'm like, yeah, there's things here that are kind of wonky or weird, but in reality, what we're seeing is that we're trading across a range that we've already technically kind of traded through before in terms of value, but we're only about half of that has been traded before, and that's the top half. So this has become like a really huge supply zone right here. And my concern is, again, that there's maybe a desire to get down lower, and one of the ways you can do that is by trying to push back up and just barely kind of clip that supply zone that would be the previous bottom here. And that makes sense. That would be like a hook to us. And that could provide you with enough, I want to say support on the opposite side, but like resistance to like knock it back down. So if you were to kind of move across here and then have like a breakout, but it doesn't hold, you could see why that's pretty similar to what happened previously on AMC in this area. This also had that initial move that looked like a breakout, but it didn't hold. Conversely, I think argumentatively, you could say that no matter what happened here, and we were talking about it maybe coming back up immediately, that coming back down still may make more sense at this time in order to cross later. So whether it has like a head fake and comes down way off in the future in like March, that's not way off, but like a month or so from now in March, versus doing it right now where it goes up to like 4s and then comes back down, we would see this as pretty likely, I think, personally. Like, I would look at this and be like, yeah, that makes sense. And we had talked about coming down to maybe 226, like that would be equal to $1 in terms of valuation, and then jumping the creek later here in a more definitive finale, right? And that's the one that gives you the push up back to the top, yada, yada, yada. We've already been through this, and that would be ultimately like the bigger jump, right? And we had talked about how there was a space. So like the reason I'm going through this is because long term, nothing's really changed. And I think this is difficult for some folks because they're thinking that like everything's different than what was already talked about last year even. But really, like, nothing's changed that much. This is just a massive range build out. And I think that when you look at the bottom line here, everything's actually pretty much exactly the same. And so in order for us to kind of make a better advancement, we have to trade high again. We have to go back up and break out. What's weird is that even now, like looking at this, it's like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But even looking at it now, I'm like, really, this quote unquote January move that everyone anticipates would really just be pushing up to here, in theory, in terms of value. And then the secondary move, which again is still a big move, right? It's not like a tiny thing, but that secondary move would be ultimately like just a push towards, and I can't tell you exactly where it is from here because I have this messed up. But basically, this would be right in the center of the reverse split, because if we did it right, it should be right there, right in the middle of the split. The secondary move, which again looks like, hey man, maybe that doesn't even go past like 40s or something, you know. I think it will, but I'm also gonna hold my tongue about it for now, because I think it likely also could go to like near 60s. That ultimately, like, this is the second move, and it's a return back to kind of like this bottom right here. And to me, it makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons, because usually, again, historically, you do come back to that drop zone. And so I don't think it's going to hold there. I think it'll push above a good bit and then come back down and trade pretty much across where that gap is at the 40s. But this is kind of like the way that I've looked at it for quite a while. And I don't think that the way in which this travels needs to be like confusing at all, you know. I think it could be pretty straightforward. What if it doesn't get there? Yada, yada, yada. You said that this is potentially like the move down here. What if it only ever gets to 20? Well, what if? I mean, the thing about it is, like, I can do it half a dozen different ways. At the end of the day, it's a question of whether the shift chart or the newer kind of valuation chart connects to the previous in the same manner that you would expect. And I don't think it will. I think that it's going to be shifted. And so there's been folks who have talked about going to all-time highs, but even in my mind, I'm like, well, look, man, that move, if it happens again, even just exactly the same way, but it happens like shifted down, like, I don't think it goes beyond this like 80 top. And I think that that's by design. And they're like, well, yeah, but I think it's got to go to all-time highs. Well, that's not all-time highs. It sounds like it because it's 81 instead of what used to be like 70, but now that's 300. But in reality, like, even if you had put that back towards the shift, it's like, sure, like, at some point you might say that that looks almost like all-time highs, but that's because that was pre-shift. So yeah, if it breaks above here before the shift, then it comes basically back up to all-time highs, you know, right here. But if you add the shift value to it, I think it's low. And I actually think this middle pocket makes the most sense. And the question of like whether or not it continues is really the big question, I think, for me, not whether or not it ever gets back up here. I think it will. So it's really just a long-term wait, a long-term play. Everything else that's happened here has been just kind of secondary to like a bigger picture. And I don't really feel like there's anything particularly mysterious about the bigger picture. Again, on the basis of like, I know AMC has consistently traded a particular pattern for the last few years. And one of the things that's very consistent about it is the retracement back to, very, very consistent about it, to this area, like to that drop zone. And that's not really something that I think is super debatable. Like, I cannot find a single example where that doesn't happen. And so the problem isn't like whether I think it gets there, it's kind of when. And also, looking at this, it's also like, hey man, there's another problem, which is that shift value has already happened and it's lower. And so we're really talking about a two-part move. The first part is actually the actual move to the 45 gap, but it only goes to 20. So in terms of valuation, that's kind of like the first big move is right here. And it does propel you over what used to be the creeks. So it like gives you this sense of like, oh, we're jumping the real creeks. It's true. And it would look like that to the naked eye. But that's actually only about like a halfway point on the bigger move, right? And that, weirdly enough, that second move, even though it does go back to the 45 in our present time, like the way that we see it right now visually on the chart, in reality, that's the actual big move that would have gone up and rivaled all-time highs had there not been all this other stuff that had happened. You can't say like, at this point, you can't say like, well, it definitely like would have happened this way or whatever before. There's nothing really to that. I think that's a bit silly. Like, obviously we can't know for sure what would or could have happened, in a previous time. So I think it's a bit silly to kind of worry about that. But I also think that it's pretty straightforward, like from my point of view. It's a big wave. It'll have a corrective wave. The corrective wave will look weaker, unfortunately, than most people would like. But that's because, again, it's been shifted and the valuation has changed pretty dramatically. So, like at this point, I'm not particularly worried about it. I'm just saying, like, at this point, it's sort of it is what it is type of deal. And I don't think it's going to change. I think there's an issue with the community that we have that everybody wants there to be like continual updates and stuff. But I'm like, really, in the end, like it's not, like nothing really changes on the big picture here. Like it stinks, but it is what it is. And I could go through and like show you half a dozen different examples of like this patterning on AMC, and they all have the same result. So I don't personally think there's any real reason to fret about the particular price action that we're dealing with right this second. And that being said, how do you trade it, right? This is the place that I think gets people kind of messed up, because there's an expectation that you have to catch every big move on AMC. And the truth is that they've not really given us very good opportunities. I got to be very straightforward. The options chain on AMC is a big money pit. If you trade options on this stock, unless you're like in it literally right before the move and you're out right as the move is going up, you're probably not making much money, because there's so much volatility crush. There's so much that goes on. It's a very hot potato stock. Like right now I'm trading AMD, okay? And I traded it from down here, really way over here on this breakout at 114.07. It repeatedly dropped through 114.07 after I got into the trade, but it didn't lose that much value. And then when it took off, now I'm like able to just sit on the position and hold it, and it's still holding pretty decent value. There's like a sturdiness to it. But for some of these small caps, maybe they have like smaller floats and smaller market caps, it's not a very easy to trade system. Like they'll inflate pretty quickly and then they'll deflate pretty quickly. And typically they don't regain their value if they don't hold it like immediately. So that might be true of like universally a lot of options, because if you buy a contract and it loses like more than 50% value, a lot of times it doesn't ever regain it. But for AMC particularly, I find it to be extremely obnoxious in that regard. And so a shares only position is honestly probably one of your better bets, and or leaps. And leaps are just long-term contracts. You're talking about a year out or more. And even if you had gotten them a year out last year, they got crushed, in the end. So it's like there's not really a great safety net there, I guess, with AMC. And I don't really I got to be honest with you, I feel like I've traded AMC very successfully only on the major moves. And then beyond then, even like puts or whatever, trading downside, I don't do shorts, but I guess I could. Aside from like covered calls, which apparently a lot of people do on AMC, I don't really see that being a great moneymaker. Trading shares, probably, if you can manage to trade the chart. But I've made more in the last like 3 weeks than I made like the last several months of last year just staring at AMC's chart. And that's not me trying to be like a apologetic for like how to trade the market, like you shouldn't trade this, shouldn't trade that. But it was me really just listening to other people, because a lot of people would come on and say, have you tried to use this stuff with other tickers that have more consistent, like larger liquidity pools, things like that? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, kind of. Like I did it on IWM and on some others pretty well. And I found that, believe it or not, it's pretty easy when you're paying attention to make good money elsewhere, because again, if you're just throwing money down the toilet, you can say whatever you want to say about, oh, I'm trapped in AMC, I got to get out of this play, boo-hoo. Like, everybody's trapped in it, right? Anyone who's got into it in the last, before a year ago would be negative. So a year ago, on January of 2024, it was up here at like 550. Anybody who would have gotten into it would be negative right now. Really, the only people that are positive on AMC right now, think about this. The only longs who are positive on AMC had to have bought in this tiny little bottom right here. Think about that. Let me repeat that. The only longs, I'm talking about people who are shares only, who would be positive on AMC right now, would have had to have bought in beneath $3.20 right now on this chart. It is literally like not even 1%. I feel like it's got to be like, I mean, if it is 1%, it wouldn't surprise me. But it's like 1 or 2% of this entire chart's history. That's it. So if you think you're alone and you feel like you don't have the answers and you're stuck and blah, 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 dude, everyone in this play is stuck unless you're like shorting it to death. The shorts have largely dominated. I said this like 3 years ago, and you get like derided, and if it were a stage, people would have been throwing tomatoes and lettuce at me or something goofy, Like, they call you a shill, but it was like, everybody's like, do you think they're still trapped in the play? No. Why in the world would anyone still be trapped in this if they were a short? They are not. They are not. If anything, they could have gotten out right here, gone back to the below here and gotten out of that position. Well, see, then they got out, so now we're going to have free reign to go up. Look, man, all I'm saying is, if you look at the chart, nobody here is positive. Like, statistically speaking, nobody. Unless you bought in right here, like considerably. So like, it's not really a question of, for me, it's not a question of opinion. It's mathematics. Let's look at the dang chart. Like, you're at $3.27. Unless you average down or bought in here, you are not positive. And I'm saying there's definitely people that probably bought in low, but no, like nobody's green right now. On average, it's not possible. And so like being at a bottom might make you feel like queasy or sick to your stomach, because you're like, man, when is this thing going to run? Why am I waiting so long? How do I know when it's going to run? Somebody please tell me. Booksy, why were you wrong about this? Why didn't we go up to there? I really want to get out of this position. I mean, I can't make the chart move. I don't have that power. I'm not a not a roaring kitty type who's got millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and can cause anything to happen, right? I can't. I can do the best I can and still be wrong, and still have room to improve. Like, that's me. But what I can say, even though I can't make the chart move and I can't be right all the time, what I can say is that it doesn't really look to me like a chart that is doomed to downside forever. It really doesn't. And there's a lot of issues with what happened up here that I just think are really unresolved. And that's all there is to it. And it's not it went down, therefore it has to go up argument, right? It's about the nature of the market. And I heard somebody say once in this channel that I heard someone once say in this channel like that the only thing that TA people are using is this idea that what comes up must go down, what goes down must come up. And I find that to be kind of amusing, because when we're sitting here talking about waveform, it's like, yeah, because the market does react. Like when things sell off, people buy in. Like, and when things are bought in too heavily, people sell off. Like the nature of the market is, and the nature of TA is a yin yang. It's a supply demand market. So whether or not you believe in that or whatever you want to say about it, like, why did I think this was going to go back up? Not because it came down, but because what those indicators were telling me and because of what ultimately what's happening on the bigger picture. Like this should give way, this small little micro pop here is giving way to the lemming. It's a little lemming, right? It's giving way to the orders to the lemming, which is a much larger, huge macro picture of like what's really happening when we're coming down here. Like, why are we coming down here for liquidity and all this other stuff? Why did we leave all these gaps behind? Because we're probably going to go back up and fill them. We haven't retested certain things, stuff like that. That's technical analysis based on, yeah, waves, like you're going up and down. And it's really straightforward. Well, you could just go down forever, right? You don't have to come back up ever. Yes and no. This is where you get to the place of like, I know I'm kind of arguing with nobody here, but like you get to the place of like, either you do or you don't, right? Either you do believe this or you don't. And I can't change your mind about it necessarily. But cause and effect has been universal in the market since the beginning. And the idea of cause and effect being that like, we did this with the P&F charts, that when you build a cause, whether it's to go down or to go up, that sideways period is for a purpose. People don't typically trade sideways just to continue to go sideways. That doesn't make any sense. It actually goes in some ways against the nature of the market. Now, is it possible that part of the plan is to collect on, like selling calls or selling puts or whatever? Is that part of this? Sure, there's some people that will reap benefits from sideways action. But ultimately, the reason that we trade in a particular range is to satisfy that range. Once there's no longer interest in that range, and people will lose interest over time in every range, historically, you will at some point move to a different range. And that's who wins, who had the greater cause, who built up more reason to go, right? If there's more bulls than there are bears, at the end of the day, even if bulls are kind of exhausted, they're going to win out. They're going to move it up. So this idea of supply and demand, of cause and effect, it's there or it's not. And if you think it's not there, then I don't know how to trade the market. So when I look at something like AMC, I'm like, yeah, cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. And I don't think the effect here will be continued downside, right? You might say, well, I think it is. I think it's going to, go sideways and then dump to 20 cents or something. And it'd be more reverse splits. Maybe, but there's a problem with what was left behind. And that's where you can get into like behavior analysis and like why patterns even appear in the market. Like why are there even remotely consistency in the market? It doesn't make sense. If the market's all random, right, there shouldn't be like consistent patterns. Well, why do they appear? Because that's the way the people behave in certain trading setups, right? It's not really that complex in some regard. I think that there's a natural rhythm to the market that makes perfect sense to me. But anywho, I digress. So like the point of this was to say like, I'm not going to really change my mind about this overnight for any particular reason. Zero price discovery in these tickers. is control price, not investors. I don't know about that. I think that's a bit out there. Like, what is the price discovery here? We went above the previous range here. Tried it out. That's price discovery. We tried high. Didn't succeed. Came back. Dropped through that range completely. Looking backwards at it right there. Hooked on that range and then pushed low. That's price discovery. Where do we push? We pushed low, and if you believe what I'm saying here, we pushed to below this previous range here. That's price discovery. This is not complex. This is very simple. Like, this is the range that was originally traded for years and years and years. It went low, then it went high. So it tested low, probably found a lot of sellers there. It was bought up, tested high, probably found a lot of sellers there. Then they decided we're going to take it down even lower, and now we're below the previous bottom. That's price discovery. It's not price discovery on maybe the terms you want it to be on, but it's price discovery. What are we talking about right here? We're talking about how we're trading in this zone. This is all price discovery. That we miss certain things when we talk about that. When it ripped to 13, the moves are artificial. No. Because that's a back test. That move to 13 was a back test from valuation point, a back test to right here, which was the bottom of the January move. It wasn't random. I've already talked about this. This is not random either. This is 100% like already in the motion before January and June happened. Like, this was the direction that bulls were trying to go. It's like a 100% markup from the previous all-time highs. It's not artificial. The fact that it moves away from this like midpoint here on the wave, like 50%, and then slingshots around it, it's only artificial if you don't see it happening. When you see it happening, you're like, oh, it's right there. Yeah, I'm not going to agree with you. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. The whole point of like traveling above a particular price in order to drop back through it, that to me is like cause and effect. Like, we're building ammunition to drive the price back down. I talk about these 50-50 moves all the time. I don't think this is artificial movement. I think it's very controlled movement. The fact that we drive up this much above the center mark liquidity and then drive back down that much, the same part on the other side, is not artificial necessarily. It's cause and effect. And this is the chicken and the egg argument, because at the end of the day, you're not wrong to say that, like, well, market makers and these big operators run the market. Yeah. But these big operators are the ones building the cause and effect. They hold almost all the cards. But to say then that there's no true price discovery isn't accurate. It's basically saying, like, I just want to exclude people who can effectively move the price of the stock. Well, too bad. Like, there's trading entities out there that can trade in quantities of tens of millions. If you can't trade in quantities of tens of millions, you can't effectively move the price of the stock. But to sit there and say that that's not cause or effect, that's just ignorance. Sorry. Not sorry. Like, if you sat down at a poker table and you sat down across from like a billionaire, the fact that you run out of money before he does doesn't mean the game is rigged. It just means that you were sitting across from a billionaire. Like, his ability to play the game or her ability to play the game longer than you and to make more effective moves and to strategize like over a longer term because of the resources that they have does not mean that it's quote unquote rigged. It means that there's a bigger person in the play. That's why we talked about the emu for like 2 years, which was this goofy way of describing an alpha operator, which is exactly what Wyckoff is about. This guy did an analysis on this, I don't know, 100 plus years ago. It's still the same story. Like, this isn't something new. So when I look at this, I'm like, I don't know where that's coming from. This idea that, like, oh, it's completely new, it's manipulated. Yeah, there are new things in the market. Like, the fact that we have algorithmic trading, in my opinion, it makes it more apparent, like, what the big players are doing. But it's predictive. It's descriptive. You can see it and you can analyze it, and it's there, and the patterns consistently repeat themselves because these quantum computers are really good at tricking people, but at the end of the day, they like to do the same thing. They're making money. Y'all, like, that's the thing about this is like, yeah, Wyckoff talked about it 100 years ago before computers were around, right? But when this play first started and everybody was getting in it, do you not remember like that was the battle cry that people had? That was their battle cry, was that we're sick of these big players running the market because they have all this money, they can do all these different things. Well, what did the SEC do about that? Not much. All they did was try to make things more transparent, and people weren't satisfied with the job that they did, obviously. So what? If you were able to see their short positions, is that going to change the game completely? No. It probably just tell you how it's like getting to see one of their cards on the table. Like, all right, I just want to see one of their cards. All right, we'll let you see one of their cards. Since they have so much advantage, we'll let you see one of their cards in their hand. Okay. Is that going to ultimately change whether you win the game or not? No. Not necessarily. It's just another part of the game, like another piece that they can kind of use to their advantage or use to their disadvantage or whatever. Okay, what benefit would it do you to know how many shorts are in the play? You wouldn't get in? Maybe. Or maybe they would just use that information to play the game more strategically. So I don't think manipulation is just the system. I think it's the players. And I think the players are smarter because they're smarter. Like, it's called smart money for a reason. What? You're saying that these institutions are smarter than retail traders? I'm not saying any particular individual in that institution is singularly smaller or smarter than some other individual out here. But as the vast collective, yeah, I'm sorry, but they are. Because that's the whole nature of like your 401ks and all this other junk that people have. All these people have put their trust that these folks are going to make money, so they pour as much as they can into it. That's the whole point of like why this GameStop thing was such a big deal. Like it threw a wrench in that idea that they were always going to win. Now the cards have been revealed. Do I think they're going to continue to try to win? Probably. I don't take anything for face value when it comes to these hedge fund managers and stuff mouthing off about AMC or GME. Like, there's always some motive behind it. I remember that guy on GME said, like, oh, well, I guess you win. We'll get out of your position because you guys are obsessed. Okay. Do I really think that he feels that way? I don't know, man. Maybe. Sometimes the best bluff is the truth. But I just think that the whole thing is it's a game from the beginning. Like, there's nothing new under the sun, guys. There really isn't. People have been swindled out of their money by other players since the beginning of time. Like, since money was around. Well, that's wrong. They shouldn't be able to do that. Well, they're playing by the game rules. Well, we should change the game rules. Yep, that's how this whole thing started. I don't think that anyone's wrong to think that it's broken. It is broken to some degree because it favors certain things. But at the end of the day, like, even if those things were fixed, it doesn't change the fact that you're playing against somebody who's got infinitely more resources than you and me. So I'm not of the opinion that like it's not manipulated. I think that that's kind of obvious. But I'm of the opinion that I don't think that manipulation is necessarily a crime based on what we understand about the market and how demand works. I'm sorry, but like if you buy into a stock and then somebody else says, "No, I don't like this stock," and they've got 10 times more resources than you, which one of you is going to have a greater, effect on the stock? There's nothing else to it. That's not a crime for someone to bet against you. So there's a fine line between what people decry and what people say is like, this is crime versus like what actually is crime. Like we have definite things in the market that feel very messed up, that feel very broken. Those things I think can and should be addressed. But then there's other things that I'm like, I don't know, man. You're just complaining or you're just upset because that person has a ton more resources. Like, that's true. But and I don't disagree with you, Budge, about that. That's one of those things where it's like, yep, we can both agree that was super messed up. Absolutely. There's no argument there. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's definitely things there. The idea of naked shorting is messed up. It doesn't make any sense. And it's hard to prove. And it definitely exists, but it's hard as crap to prove. And it's like, that's one of those things that's like, yep, totally get it. Conflicts of interest, an MM in a hedge fund. Is conflict of interest something that's messed up? Yes. I totally agree. So, like, if you were taking a soundbite from the stuff I talk about, it would sound like I'm against this AMC GME movement type deal. I'm not. I think that you need to have reform continually in the markets, especially as you get new and emerging technologies. AI and combined with like quantum computing is going to be a nightmare for so many people. But what can they do? You can, at some point, you're just taking away freedoms when you start saying like, well, you can't do this. You can't trade with an algorithm. Okay, well then neither can Joe Schmo in his basement. The fact that they trade with an algorithm that has billions of dollars behind it or millions of dollars behind it, and we trade with an algorithm that only has a few thousand, isn't going to change anything, Like, especially considering the fact that, again, Wyckoff talked about it 100 plus years ago. The exact same things people complain about today. Market manipulation and stuff based on how they're trading it. Upthrust, what is a head fake actually accomplishing for liquidity purposes? This head fake right here probably accomplished a double move, and it did. We're going up to sell high, we're enlisting more sellers so we can then drive the price back down low in a 50-50 kind of swing. Well, there it is. And even the markers are there. So it really doesn't even matter. I mean, we kind of like going off on a tangent here, but in some ways it doesn't make any difference. Because at the end of the day, it's like you either read the chart or you don't. You either sell the news or you don't. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of strategies. You either buy a fundamentally good company or you don't. I mean, it is what it is. You decide how you want to react to it. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe Booksy's wrong. Maybe there is some kind of ethical problem with the market beyond what I'm just saying. Maybe there's all kinds of issues. But, I mean, what are we going to do? Like, it is what it is. You either play this or you don't. And you don't have to. Nobody's forcing people to play this. And it doesn't have to be gambling. If you look at something like this and say, okay, here's the signal. So what I would have said, and we didn't look at this recently, what I would have said on Rhyme was, if it comes back through the creek here, it's going to be bad news. This is right where you needed to see it bounce, and it didn't bounce. And then it hooked on the floor. I mean, that's kind of all there is to it, right? There's two major weaknesses here. One was right here. It did not hold a trend support. The second was right here. It did not hold the floor support. So, like, there's opportunity in Rhyme to trade this and get out if it doesn't do what you think. And ultimately, like, if a move, especially on the daily, wicks above, but most of the candle body, almost, or all the candle body is exclusively below the top, that's an upthrust. That's basically like if it's a high volume candle that's got a massive wick coming down and it's trading consistently below the top of the range, but it's not able to push resistance and hold it, that's an upthrust. That's distributive action. Somebody's selling into the market. Like, it's a cheat sheet for understanding how bigger operators are potentially working. Are bigger operators in this play? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I think some large operators trade penny stocks? Probably. Most of them don't. But like, if they're shorting it down, then yeah, they might. They might see it as kind of a cash cow. And you got to remember, like, hedge funds aren't just your citadels. There's thousands of them. They're all kinds of sizes. So there are definitely hedge funds out there that specialize in dismantling companies. Like, we know that. It happens all the time. Distress funds is what they call them. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. So, like, for us to look at it and say, this is manipulation, I mean, it could be. But you have the signs right there. It needed to do certain things. It didn't do it. So when this broke down around 33 cents, Jason, at Rhyme, after coming up to like 38 here, or it's not 33 cents, sorry, it's 3 cents, but it's 0.38, 0.39, and then it comes down to 0.33. I mean, it just lost its uptrend. So, and I have it drawn a little wrong. It lost it right here on the 28th, which was yesterday. So it's right here. So this was a dangerous play. I think we had talked about Rhyme being pretty risky because it has to do certain things in order to advance. When it doesn't do that, now you're looking at, well, now it needs to come way back up to jump this creek. That's where the resistance is. It's way up here. As the crow flies straight up, it would be like 0.032. It's basically coming back above that floor. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen now that we're down low. Now, RSI is kind of a mixed bag. I'm on the 6 minute. It looks like a wave up, like this was the buy-in here. And then you can see we're down low. The last time this happened and we were this low, it did continue to sell down. So unfortunately, like, this is just a really difficult one because there's not really a great pattern of like, hey, once it hits oversold, it gets over the top. When we were talking about NU, that had a really solid pattern. And NU was one that we watched pretty religiously for a while. And what we were saying is that if you check out the 4 hour, it never gets to a place where it's oversold like this without coming all the way back up and getting overbought. It's consistently done this over the last few years. So it makes it an easier trade because you're like, well, it's consistently doing this, right? Which means the people that are trading it are consistently waiting to sell off. They're pushing it until it hits this point. When you look at something like Rhyme as like a penny stock, a little more of the Wild West out here is not consistently doing that. It makes it very difficult because there's not a clear pattern, right? And so you could look for something like a divergence on an indicator, or you could look at like moving averages and see like how long does it take before it comes back to moving averages. Again, at the end of the day, like, you're kind of at the mercy of the chart here, and I think there's a massive potential for downside here to come really low. So what we were saying is that based on where it was, this was historically like a long-term trend. This is the most common place that it found support, but it does occasionally dip below it quite far. So if and when it finds support on this marker, and it hasn't yet, it's kind of coasting along it right here, then it could push back up. But it's going to be like a shot in the dark kind of deal where it's got to make that support and then push up. And it's really, you're talking about a 100% move, and that's about it, from 0.03 to 0.06. And beyond that, you're definitely at risk here of like, well, this could be like a double flush, because it was brought up pretty high to drop down beneath this level here. So it could definitely go to like 0.018. And we had talked about this previously as like a very risky trade. That this is something that you got to be careful with. So if I'm trading something like a penny stock, I might get it right 80% of the time on something like an AMD, which is going, I'm making money on it right now. I'm making good money on it. And it's like anticipating where these markers are. It's pretty easy. I'm still looking up here at like potentially 120. That's kind of the end of the trade for me for now. But it's a big trade, versus maybe something like Rhyme where I'm like, I might put money into it, but it's got to be money that I'm willing to kind of lose. And speaking of money that I'm willing to lose, B-Hat, you guys are like, what? You're still looking at B-Hat? Why would you be looking at B-Hat? B-Hat actually went low, and I like it low. So Blue Hat went really, really low, and I bought it really, really low. I bought it at like 36 cents. Why, Booksy? Because of this. Because it's just very rare that it historically has ever gotten this low. Like, it almost never happens. So, it's probably going to have a reaction just on the basis of the fact that it dumped so far. Does that mean it's going to be really profitable? Maybe not. You know, there's been plenty of times where this has had a dump and then it rebounds a little bit and then it still goes lower and then it has a bigger rebound. But for now, like, I'm just trading an auto reaction. I saw an opportunity to trade it when it dumped beneath 43 cents. I told you guys I was going to mark off 43 cents, and if it came below, I might trade it. Long term, I think it's hitting this bottom, which is really important because this was like the sign of weakness from like a really long time ago on Blue Hat Interactive. This is a really small company as well. But you can see like way back here, in 2022, right after the split, makes a big double bottom at the end of 2022, last 6 months. And this double push right here is the main marker that I'm using presently. It just hit it. And so, being that it's ridiculously oversold and it's on a historical potential support, I think it's a really simple trade. I don't think it's very complex. I don't know how long I'm going to trade it. I think I bought like 3,000 shares or something ridiculous. I think it'd be kind of weird to think about it going up really far. But that's the sort of stuff that gets you into trouble. If you traded from bottom to top here on the 30-minute, would it be lucrative? Potentially, but you'd have to sit through a lot. Like, because this is the last example. This is December. You can see it actually made lower lows before it finally like broke out, and it took a really long time. So yeah, I mean, was this a lucrative play? Probably would have been if you had traded it, but you would have had to held through some pretty crazy stuff, like it dipping lower. I definitely could see something like that happening here, especially if this gets back up to like 30 or like 50. I'm kind of wondering when to get out, and I think I probably would get out around maybe 2.5, like the 25% marker, which is around 3.8. Am I in XRP? No, but I talked about XRP moving pretty far. I'm in Doge. So yeah, I'm not recommending you guys trade B-Hat necessarily, but I definitely think it's a possibility here that it has a pretty decent rebound. So I'm going to add an alert here. Maybe it goes all the way up to 0.5. I don't know. If you guys are like, you bought 3,000 shares? Yeah, but each share was like 4 pennies, so, or whatever it was. I don't know when I bought it. So it's like, it's not really that much money. It's like $100 or $200 or something. It's like nothing. Still, I mean, if it grows 100%, it grows 100%. Or if it grows even like 25%, it's still 25% trade. I think the percentages are more important than just the bottom line numbers. So AMD has been the one that I was really touting yesterday because I thought it was a good trade, and I posted my entry on Tuesday here, and I'll check those positions right now. So that's a 150 strike for March, and they're up 41%. So I got quite a few of those. So they're pretty good. They're doing pretty good. I was looking for about a 50% gain. So right now it's working in my favor. I'm almost there. So the trade itself is basically done. In fact, I'm probably going to go ahead and exit some of these. Not all of them. I exited a couple this morning. I'm going to exit a couple right now. And yeah, because I like the way it's going, but I'm going to go ahead and take some profit off the table. So this is a 41%. So the first one was 24%. This is going to be 41% gain on these contracts. It's going to be hard to put this into like monetary terms. I'm going to have to split up my entry, but I'm going to try to do it. I'll just divide it, I guess. If I can get out. It may not work out. It's dropping a little bit. Yeah, volatility here is kind of high, so let's see. So they're swinging pretty far left and right. So what I might do is do like a stop loss on a couple of them instead. It's like 41% now. Oh, never mind. It got filled. The swing went back the other way. So I bought them for $1. I just sold I sold a couple contracts this morning, 2 of them for $1.34. I sold a few more for $1.51. Easy money. Because this was a really easy to see trade, and it actually works because it's a stock that's not like AMC. So yeah, man, Jason, I hope that I didn't give you very much here, but it's oversold again, so maybe that's a good thing after this push. There's not much to say in terms of that otherwise. I can't really comment on it. You know, maybe a divergence on the 4-hour because of how low it's coming, and the RSI is still kind of holding up. What that tells me is that the buyers have been, and that's true, the volume's been ramping up. Buyers and sellers are kind of doing more down lower. So there's definitely people in this that are expecting some kind of like a squeeze or something to keep buying in. But reality needs to sink in that this could go pretty much to nothing. So I need you to be aware of that. If you're trying to like salvage this position, I would suggest like a 50% retrace is possible, which means you can come back to like 0.031. And then I wouldn't go much beyond that at this point unless it gets above there. So I would be looking at that 32. It's like 0.32. Okay. Now, winners and losers, right? So like winner this morning has been AMD, which is kind of like way up. Loser this morning, NNOX. So this is one I got in pretty low as well. It looks like it's just generated like a hook, but I think it's kind of going to be more like a double bottom. I'm not positive yet. More like a bounce before reaction, because I do think it's going to react back up to 822. This could take till next week, so I'm being patient with it. Unfortunately, I don't think if you're contracts only versus shares, I don't think this is going to be super lucrative unless it breaks out. So I got 12.5 contracts on the principle that if it does come back out here and it can manage to make this jump right here, which I know is a lot to ask for, roughly right here, if it can jump this creek, it should be a pretty hard reversal all the way back up to near the tops previous. And I think it's going to push above 1067 again. So even if it's distributive, I think it would probably try to do that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. And the worst case scenario is this dumps down to nearer like 660 and does that move low. So instead of like crossing up and pushing high to hit 1070, it drops, like this holds low and then pushes up later and only ever comes back to like 840. So like there's a lot riding on the current setup. And so I think I posted it too when I did it in the Discord. I think I said like it doesn't really look, I might have said it about Wolf, maybe not NNOX, but it doesn't really look like super sure, like a surefire thing. Like, yeah, surefire, right? It wasn't really like that. Um, and I felt the same way about, I don't know, I might just trade out a B hat, make a few pennies or something. I felt the same way about Wolf. Wolf is one that, guys, is about to have an earnings like tonight after market. So one of the things that I mentioned, MPW is just chilling at 440. Fang is one that I've been watching. I think it's worth watching. It's doing what I thought it would do. Almost looks exact, but I'm waiting to see what happens here and see if it comes back down. So if it does, I think it's going to come down into earnings. Then we'll have a really good buy-in. We could make some good money on that long term over the next couple months. Wolf is one that had some issues because it kept dropping low. It's not holding that previous resistance. So it looks like, yeah, it looks distributive to me. So what it looks like is the cat ear, and these are up thrusts that are pushing now through that ice, through that 615 area, and you can see the wicks. I'm on the 30 minute, but you see those wicks are really struggling. It's struggling to hold here in this range, and that to me is like, oh, okay. Not looking too hot. And so what I mentioned yesterday was like, my thought is probably like a cat ear. I might have been a little too soon about it, but so what I would expect is to have like multiple up thrusts here in some kind of an M shape. So normal cat ear, if it goes sideways, would look like this. If it goes sideways and down, and you'd have like multiple up thrusts here, lows, multiple up thrusts here, because it'd be waves within waves kind of thing. That may or may not happen the way you think it will here, because it technically, like, sometimes it does happen beneath that quote-unquote ice level, that rising support right there. It can happen beneath that, or it can happen above it. Either way, it could be bearish or bullish, so it doesn't really matter. The other thing I'm not sure about is maybe it's still in the middle, which is a little confusing. Like, timing-wise, the waves tend to be fairly even. So what I would say is, I don't want to get rid of that just yet. But what I would say is, like, this first wave, we probably want to like measure it out and see if we have like a middle point, and I think we do right here. So there's like a midpoint on the wave. You can use a sine wave, I guess, thing, but first I need to find the rough, just to have it, the rough timing of where that is. I think that's roughly right. And then we can check over here, same deal. So I think that's about right. So now we could use a waveform thing just to have it on the chart. That way you don't have to have like constant, it's only going to last as long as it lasts, right? So we're just talking about this as a top. So it may not last very long, but we're going to, we'll draw it anyways just to use it, a sine wave thing. I don't use it as often as I could. So what we're going to do is do this. And yeah, that seems pretty accurate. Low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high. So the reason that that's important is because this is where I would have expected, you can see I drew it out, just kind of just eyeballing it. This is where I would have expected there to be like a high. So if it can't go further, then the next low could be really, really bad. It's a matter of like whether we're switching from like a, what's the word? Let's just say tiers, because I think layers and tiers kind of work together. From like a low tier to a higher tier wave, because there may be a higher tier wave here that you're not really seeing. Again, I don't particularly love the sine wave thing because it just goes on forever. But there could be another wave here that's to the upside, right? So the other question in the mix is there a larger wave at play? And again, this is the wave that we always talk about with the cat ears, because it's an S curve or it isn't, right? If it's an S curve, then it should be pushing up towards 830, right, in this wave, would give way. And part of the way that we'd analyze this is essentially like this. So the way that I have it is like, this needs to come back above that cross. This is the mechanics of the wave. Like, the reason that so many times like this is consistent is because, and why this particular value here yesterday that I called out is very important. And I don't know what other color to make it, because it's starting to look really messy on here. I guess I can get rid of this box. That particular marker does indicate like almost always where that wave is. So when I look at this, I'm looking at this like, is it going to give way to the next wave? And in order to do that, you would see this M cross hold above and break out. So the way I have it drawn out was like, it would go sideways here. This would be the top. That's still consistent with what we're seeing. But I think after that, yeah, that's about right. I think that's even. So then after that, let's get rid of this wave thing now. Then what? Because if we didn't make that push up and we only went to here, which is what it looks like. I don't know why I got rid of that. That could be a problem. Yeah, that's definitely like the upper wave is trying. So this looks like a 1-2 here, even though this came low, which again kind of looks weak as all get out. It looks not great. This looks like the middle of the cat ear wave. Like we're missing the next two. So I think we're about to get it. And my thought was it would probably happen into close today. That's why I have it drawn out the way I do, because like I thought we're probably going to end up happening into close. So this could, if it's distributive, here we can go a step further on this. We have the technology. We have enough information here. Yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then down. So it should be here. I think that's the low catch cat ear. It dropped right there. Well, it may be more like that. Frankly, it could even be this one. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at where did it break down into the low portion right there, and you can see it's right around 11. Wasn't that long ago. There's a couple places. So that wave, when it breaks back to the upside, see, this is really high. This is ugly, man. All right. I wouldn't be surprised if it dropped again one more time before it took off. Like if this comes back down, this is sort of missing a piece right there. That's done. Then this would be like the next break here. It feels like it's missing a downward motion. Anyways. Because like the 50-50 doesn't make any sense. You see how if I go to this low, it's like way up here. You're like, yeah, man, that's because it's got to take off. I mean, maybe. I think if it just took off, it could be going way up top. Certainly that's not impossible if it's going to break out. These lower ones are actually where the thing dropped off, though. So the two M's don't end until right there, which seems more logical to me. But then I'm like, that doesn't really make sense of the stretch unless we're still missing like a a downward motion, and then that would make more sense of the stretch. So like a double bottom or something here would give it a lot more clarity, like the move across that wave. So maybe it comes back down to like 593 again before it takes off. That doesn't have to happen. It's just, again, I think it's a little more sensible. And then when it pushes back out, it probably goes up, and we'll see if it makes a higher high. It really just depends on how fast it goes, I guess. Yeah, somewhere in this pocket here seems likely. So that doesn't really give me a huge amount of confidence unless, again, during this second wave, unless this holds above like a creek jump and ultimately doesn't go below this previous floor that's being tested. So if this were to manage to break out and above and hold above 611, I think it's possible, not guaranteed, but it certainly is a stronger possibility than it is right now. It's possible that this holds and still moves up quite a bit. The timing on this is looking kind of wonky too, because this is the double M down. It's really sliding. It's just ugly. So usually it's like the creek jump. Yeah, I mean, it just looks like it's going to finish right in the nick of time before close. So that's about half right there. Yeah, it's probably just aiming for close today. Let's just keep it simple, because I'm pretty sure that's right. And then this guy from top here through the middle, same deal. You can see like that's the halfway point on the wave. So I think it's going to end with the move up, probably, not the move down. Which isn't, it's just harder to read anyways. The move up would be difficult because you'd be looking for support, but you wouldn't get it. You would just see the move up. So it wouldn't surprise me if this kind of floats even high into close and doesn't really give you an answer, something like that. Because if they gave you an answer, it'd be really easy. Because this could give you that up thrust that we were talking about before, where it's coming over the top. Yeah, it's the same pattern that I have like right here, but it's just happening along 611. So we'll see how it interacts with 611, and we'll see if it makes another low here. And if it doesn't, it could be positioned for a higher push. Certainly, like, what you really ultimately want is not for it to stop here. You want it to kind of advance higher and ultimately get above here and hold support. But I get the feeling based on the timing of this that they're not going to give you that answer. So it's going to look like potentially like a head fake into close, which is unfortunate. And that's what I was kind of worried about right there. It's the same idea. It's just set up low. 1, 2, and then it doesn't actually go up. So beware the rally here. I don't think that gives you a solid answer on Wolf. I hate that, but I think that's what they're going to do. That's like my least favorite. I guess what would be a better answer is if it held above here and it closed higher after making a support. So if by some miracle this comes up and like jumps the creek and then closes above, that might be bullish. Like that would be the action right here, but it'd have to happen really fast. So this whole thing is a little bit of a crapshoot at the moment. It's definitely in the second ear. It's definitely doing the first wave of the second ear. 1. We're waiting for 2. And we're going to see if 2 crosses up and over 612. The alternative is it just doesn't even cross up and over. And that might not be the worst thing ever. You know, especially if this like takes a narrow dive and then goes up, it might be that this crosses down into close. And in some ways that is easier to read because we would have like a hook, you know, and just ready to go back down tomorrow, which is sort of what I've been anticipating. Like I'm not really positive. I just don't feel like it's going to run. Happy to be wrong, I guess, if it does run. So I mentioned if it does some kind of crazy thing at the end of the day, I'm probably going to get a put play on it and get ready for tomorrow for a potential rug pull. So it looks like AMD is taking a breather again. Not particularly concerned about it. Do I think it may have gone as far as it's going to go? I don't know. Maybe. I don't really see this as like a stopping point just yet. But I guess it's a possibility. There was like a strong resistance here. I'm more inclined to think it's going to go up to 119 first. So probably just taking a breather. Yeah, that's still positioned like straight up. Almost divergent on that 4 hour or that 15 minute. I think that because the volume's coming down here on AMD, I think it might be easier just to say it is divergent. It's basically a flat top. So 30-minute, not even like close. It just looks like it needs to take a breather. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it kind of chill out this afternoon or even the rest of the day. And maybe right now we're up 3%, and by the end of the day it's like 2 or 1. I think I'd be most surprised if it just flushed straight down at this point after coming up this far. So once it jumped that top, you're kind of committing to the potential that you're going to go all the way. It'd be weird to see it go up all the way back down before doing that. So this held, therefore you would expect it to keep going. Or I would. Yeah, 1 hour is like pretty overstretched. And typically it doesn't like die, it just doesn't, it goes more sideways. You can see back here on the reaction, once the big reaction happened, this got fairly far away from the moving average on RSI, but it just goes like sideways and down after that move. So it has this push, has like a secondary push, and it kind of comes sideways and down, chills out. Just an example. This one never did. It just kind of kept riding up, but same deal. It does close that position quite a bit before it actually goes up again. As you can see, like it's always rising, but then it narrows right here between the two before it takes off again. So I would say we're probably at like peak distance between the two at the moment. I'm not seeing a lot else like significantly far. And this one is, but again, it's sort of how you look at it. If you're looking at it more like a tangent versus straight up, that would be like really far away. But even still, I think this is about as far as it will typically get, the way I'm looking at it, before it tries to like chill out a bit. So yeah, I would not be surprised if, and it's at the 50% too on 1 hour. Is there an example of like this hitting and then not after making an advancement? Once it makes an advancement, it usually, like it did it here, it did it here, here. This hits 50 but retraces, but notice that it wasn't during an advancement period. This already made a creek jump, so I'm not going to wait against times where there was no creek jump. That would be pointless. Even this, which is a really like kind of a weaker looking move, You see that creek jump was there, it hits the 50, never retraces completely and goes back up again. Then it finally comes low way later. So I'm not seeing a lot of times where that is a problem. So that's good. It just doesn't look like much of an issue. And MFI hasn't even gotten to that point yet. This last couple times it was with it, but now it's like behind it. So that just tells me I don't think the move is done. I mean, I think it's that simple. And I would expect it maybe to hit. I still think it could potentially, even if it chilled out a bit here, it could potentially come up higher and then start coasting down after that point and doing like a deeper retracement. Let's see if, let me get rid of some of the noise on here. Let's see if I can find that trend. I bet there's a trend it's going to try to catch. Yeah, so there's this higher one, and then this is way down here. It's really low. There's that one, and then I just don't think it came up far enough. That's the 15-minute moving average. So we may get is like a double take on this where we pop slightly above the 15-minute moving average, assuming this doesn't just capitulate right now. We just didn't quite get there, like to the top where I think we should be. But then I'm going to look at one more thing, which is that creek is fine. It's not snap there. You guys are like, it's just gonna dump, Booksy. It's divergent. Maybe, but I don't necessarily think it's gonna stop. I don't know. The higher time frames don't make it seem that way. I'm gonna look for support. So this is a support right here where it finally caught. If it caught on that edge, so that's important. So I think this is where it advanced over this is like the last big support at 113.21. So I think that's the actual trend. And this is just like a retracement to get something else. All right. So I think that's probably where it's going to go before it breaks down. Like it's going to hug this little area. This is my thought anyways. I think it's going to hug this area and then try to go up again. Maybe this afternoon. If it breaks through here, then I think it could come back down pretty far. Potentially. Like really far. But for now, that's kind of where I think it's going to be. I think it's going to back up. Have some time to kind of chill out. It's backing up really far right now. Looks like it's just selling down really hard, but the volume's not there. And then I think it's going to push up again. Yeah, I mean, the 30-minute moving average is up here at like 119. I just don't know why I wouldn't get there. This is just reacting off the gap at this point. So, it's whatever. If it does break through here, I'll be really mindful to watch. It might be like this, where it's going to dip through a little bit and then react. But I'll have to watch this creek. I don't know where it is exactly. Maybe right there. It's hard to see it. It's really selling down. It's not making me look very good, is it? You guys are like, nope. I still think that's the main trend, though. That's trying to be held. So we'll see. It might even bounce and then like kind of come back through it just like it did here. and like do a liquidity dive that does some kind of sign of weakness that maybe tells us where we're going to go later, like over here. So if we aren't going to advance right now, then I think that, like really advance, then I think this is going to come back pretty low. To like there. I don't know. Maybe they'll save it for like a gap up on Thursday and then just sell all the way back through. Hard to say. Anyways. So yeah, I think this reaction makes sense. So it's reacting right now off that bottom. It's right where it should be. I think it reacts and might try to make a lower dive. Very curious to see if it makes like a little sign of weakness here. I'm just thinking it might dip down low, kind of like we did back in this previous area. Test that and then react off of it. Who knows? That could even be like tomorrow morning. I hate to think it's going to be rinse repeat, but that's certainly a possibility if the desire is to bring it back down to like 115.50 for Friday and trade this area Friday. Like come across this area on Friday. Where's Monday? Yeah. Maybe end the week at like 116. So this would do a lot of things because like ultimately, like if bears can hold it back, I think they probably will. This would keep it beneath that 30-minute moving average, but it'd also give it like a more concrete final trend here, which we don't really have. We only have like 2 points. So this push up is going to be really important because it's the resistance push. This would give you like a new top, and then you would buckle down into Friday, maybe around 116, and it does a lot of things because it allows the bulls to come back and test these trends, 1 and then 2, and potentially I think end the week at either 115 or 116, and then next week then becomes like free range to mark back up. And I think this is where you're going to get like a rally into earnings. And you should see, in my opinion, I think we're going to see it come all the way back up to this top by earnings. So I think the trade this week is actually almost done. I would be surprised if it kept running, but I think we're going to see it push up and then spend the rest of the week kind of chopping right here around 116. And then I think from that point forward, next week, I think we'll see it pop to like 130 or near there before earnings. And who knows? I mean, it could be a lot more muted than that. Like we could chill out before earnings and run after. But I think that's probably what we're going to see. Yeah, and that's a big breakout. So once that happens, then you've got plenty of room to like flush it, reset, and go again going into February 14th. I think it's going to go pretty far, y'all. I think this is going to come all the way back up to like, I think AMD is going to be like 150 by like the week of the 14th. I really do. No guarantees, but it's way overdone on a lot of higher time frames. So, all right, AMC's back to the floor. It's at 321. So let's take a look up close. Yeah, actually, it looked like it dipped beneath it. So there's that. I mean, when we did the analysis, it kind of looked like it would go down to like 320 or 318s. It didn't look like it was going to stop right above the floor. If it didn't hit the 786, it seemed likely. It may be hard to believe that, I guess, just me saying it, but I had it drawn out on this chart like the target that I had was this little box down here because of the, not just the creeks, but like other things. There was trajectories early on that were pointing down to like 319 area. So I think we're there. Like we hit a new low. RSI at this point is definitely divergent, being on a new low, but only if it breaks out. So if this now has a reversal going into next week, it's going to be really, really bullish. So let me repeat that. Divergence is really, really powerful only if it jumps the creek. So if it at this point jumps the creek by next week, this is heavily divergent. This is going to be a really strong move to the upside. Congratulations, Scal. Thanks for keeping me updated on that. I hope you can keep making profits. Way to go. 10% is a big deal for like a swing like that. That's good. Yeah, so if this makes a bottom and can jump this creek going into next week, again, it can't keep sliding down forever, you know? At this point, maybe we get a gap fill. Who knows? That could be really bullish. I think we're going to have a good chance that this can be a strong, strong bullish chart going into next week. So definitely one to watch. In fact, I might actually trade it because it would be that strong because of the way this is set up. I'm pretty darn bullish on AMC going into next week if it can manage to get over that creek. The problem is it just hasn't quite done it yet. Weirdly flat. I mean, you can see that moving average on that RSI on the 4 hour is literally just flattened along the creek. It just feels like it's being kind of pressed as low as possible, very almost mechanically. And so I still think it's a potentially really good trade if it can manage that term, but just got to wait for that confirmation. We're not there yet. I think this one could make Bucos bucks kind of thing on a swing. So looking pretty good. Pretty saucy. 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 It looks like my AMD 150s are just 32% now. So I had sold on the highest point, I had sold at 41%. So we've yet to see those increase again. One of the conditions that I had was I wanted the IV to come up a certain amount. So I marked it off on a daily time frame. And I was waiting to see it curl back up and cross here. And this is a long-term trend with like a 50% marker. And until it kind of pulls back up here and follows through, I'm not particularly interested in being like all out of it. So it's a really tiny marker in this time frame. It looks a little bit irrelevant. You might say like, well, what does that even mean? But long-term, this is historically like at a bottom. There's the volatility IV on here is really low in terms of what's being moved. And so when I looked at this, I'd found the middle of the wave, right? And I was like, oh, it's where it should be at the middle of the wave. I really think this is ready to go, basically. So I'm trying to say. It's going to have a lot of implications, I think, when it comes up to 154, whether or not that breaks out. I definitely think it's going to go back there. I'm almost positive right after earnings. So I'm looking at this RSI. It's building back up. MFI is building up. But this is still coming down. So you're like, well, if you think it's going to be that bullish, why even get out of the play? I'm not getting out to get out. I'm getting out to get back in. Like I want liquidity fresh again. So I genuinely think, yeah, this is going to go to 150s. But I'm just going to trade my profits and then re-enter again. Like I'm very bullish on this going into next week. I don't think it's going to just capitulate and drop. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think it's back to where it needs to be. If it does drop, it's going to drop to like 107 or something. It won't be like the end of the world. So anyways, this is currently wrapping its little finger around that waveform down on the... So I think once it crosses up and over here, it's going to be gone. I think it's going to be like taking off. And that's really when I want to maximize profit on. Because I think at that point, it'll probably take off and keep climbing until it's back at the top again. So, man, AMD is like super primed. This is like reminding me of Apple a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so right now I've got a couple dud trades. One is Wolf, one is NNOX. Both are kind of slumping pretty bad. Like they're essentially hovering right around my stop loss point, which is like the halfway point. And once you lose about half of a call option, it's really hard to get it back. It's almost impossible. Like most of the time, there's something wrong with the position you're in, and it doesn't typically recover. So that's where I'm at with that one. I'm like not really feeling it right now. Yeah. So. So yeah, Wolf and Knox are both like right there where I might just have to cut them and take the L. I mean, thankfully I've got a good trade in AMD still going. It'll mitigate some of that loss, but you have to be willing to pull the plug. I'm mostly concerned about, hey look, it came back down. I'm mostly concerned about, that's great. You guys are like, what? No, it really is a good thing because it wasn't measuring out right. Now it is. See that? Now it's measuring out to like that 50% marker. So good. Very good. How did you know that, Booksy? You just know. It made a lower low, so I don't know. It just keeps pushing down like weakness here. I don't like it. But happy to see it worked out on Wolf. I'm going to check that B hat again real quick. See what that's doing today. Oh, man, look at that. Look at that recovery. Bloop. Not bad. Not bad. 0.428. It's a nice little swing. I mean, it's way up there, guys. Oh, it already crossed up and over. Was that the right one? I don't know. I can't remember what time frame I was on when I said that. Oh no, I screwed up. Wait, let's see. Oh, there's an alert set, so that could help me. Edit the alert. It was on the 30 regular trading hours. Yeah, 30 minute. 30. Yeah, so that was where I did this. So I must be imagining it's going to come up a little bit higher. Oh no. Almost there. Get out of this little thing for a little profit, little lunch money today. I'm just trading a stock that's red to less red. So funny. Oh man. BYND. Yeah, that sounds good. We'll check it. Is that Beyond? Bed Bath & Beyond? I can't remember. Or did Bed Bath & Beyond go bankrupt? I don't know what Beyond BYND is. That's Beyond Meat. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I actually think this one might be a pretty good one long term as well, but I'll have to look at it fully. This is a 4 hour. Looks like a LSPY. Wow. That kind of surprises me. I mean, the guy bit somebody or something, but yeah, I forgot. Remember that? He like bit someone, like he did a Mike Tyson on somebody. I can't remember what he did exactly, but he like bit somebody's face or something. I don't know. It's really weird. This has gone down like a lot. Ooh. So they got negative EPS for a while. Alright. Well, there's a strong bullish divergence if this can bottom. How do we know if it's done, Booksy? One, two. See, this is not even close to the same spot. Is this where the drop happened? Is that what it is? Yeah. Interesting. So this is a long-term divergence where the RSI has been building up, or supposedly building up, from bottom to bottom here. I mean, it's there. The last time it bottomed was right here, and it just kind of created a little ledge. So it might be worth marking that off because it did bottom right here. So that's clearly like some kind of resistance at 573, which we already could tell. I mean, visually you can see it. And then it broke down and it's doing like a hook motion. So this is a chart that probably will be explosive eventually. But for right now, I don't see a definite entry point. Yeah. It's just in a really steady downtrend. So let me try something real quick. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, that's a weekly time frame. So just so you know, like this is what I'm looking at right now is the weekly chart. Let's check the daily chart and let's see what's going on. So the daily chart is consistently buy low, sell high kind of thing. It's chopping between the two extremes, which is nice. So there's a lot of consistency in this daily chart. Once it gets to overbought, typically it stops. It's getting overbought pretty fast. So it looks like there might be like a hike into earnings here. Yeah, this has happened a couple times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it broke down. I don't know. There's not much of a trade here unless you're going to go between 420 and like maybe 510. Like I don't know what else to trade because it hasn't jumped anything yet. So to me, what it looks like is what we would call like a hook, which is it's generating like a new challenge to resistance by pushing back up and supply. But until it makes that kind of definitive drawback, and it could happen here, after earnings maybe, or right before it, I'd be very concerned that it's not going to turn around. And like this is really the buy-in here. And even this buy-in is like, it could have some kind of massive push and then just retrace all the way back, There's a lot that could go on. I imagine, so I did a 50-50 around the top, and I imagine this is going to be very important in the future. So there's a marker around 11 that I think is going to be pretty significant. It would not surprise me if bulls already had that eyeballed back here, thinking that they're going to potentially go back up. Yeah, like right there. So there is, in a sense, already like a directional momentum being built to head that way. That seems pretty clear to me. But it looks more like July, so I don't know. That's also debatable. It's like way out here. All right, so this is a very yeah, that's there. This is a potentially really good long-term play. If you're looking for a quick in and out, I would suggest it's probably going to pop into earnings. I'd be surprised if it just kept going, but there's not much to say about it and until this point. And then I know this seems a little odd. This is not quite the one that I usually pick, but I think this is the right one. Yeah. So long term, I think bulls are probably aiming for $24, which is a sensible place. It's kind of the middle point here on these ears, and that's usually what I look for. So I think this is going to be the long-term target of 24. So I'd be bullish about it until then, if it can start making a bottom. But the way it's presenting itself right now, it's really difficult to know when it gets there. So like this could have an early push that comes decently far, and it could take a really long time. Sort of like a head and shoulder, I guess, here. It could take a really long time to kind of build out before going up again. So this is not a very short-term play. This is like 2026 out here. So assuming that it didn't have anything majorly wrong with it, I totally think that could happen. And in fact, this little reaction may give us a lot more clarity, because if the reaction here comes up and it hits a particular place, it might give us a little more clarity as to what to expect going forward. Because like right now, this is all I have is this like hook value, and it's pretty low, as you can tell. So it doesn't look like it would go much beyond, no pun intended, I guess, 450. Like that would be a potential head zone right there. But if it manages to move higher and do what we call like a double flush or something through that 450 zone, what this does is it gives us another marker that we can then use I'm really curious about this one too. This guy here. Now That one's really important too. So it may very well do like something really dramatic like this. It may go all the way up to like near 530, which I think is this top. Yeah. Anyways, so this gives us a lot more reference points potentially if it can manage like a big swing here. And then I think later when it takes off, or I say if it takes off, this is like a shorter term target. It's probably that ledge, that that support right there. Sorry, prelim support seems more likely. There, something like that. Yeah. Anyways, what that would do is give us a better frame of reference for like where that bottom might actually come down to. So I don't think it'll hold necessarily at first. It could be, if it's super low, it could be coming down like way back below the floor before it comes back up and does like a reaccumulation. So it's like a push out that then comes back and does like a reaccumulation after a drop back down to check the creek, which again would look very different. So it's like a huge double M and then comes back up and chills out until it finally finds like its bottom more steadily. Long term kind of stuff like this is long term. I mean, you kind of just wait and see what happens. There should be other evidences that this is what would happen, but I don't right now know if I could find them. Like maybe this. That one as well is right there. Yeah, so that's about right. So that would be like another potential evidence that that could happen. It kind of suggests this could be squeezing this year going into like March. But then I bet the rest of this is built out slower, like way slower. Like way, way slower. So the thing is, like, the only thing I'm not sure about is how far it pushes right now at earnings. Everything else is already on the chart. Those are just markers that are already there. So this would make sense because when you first come off of the exit zone right here, this is where you'd be defining direction ultimately. And like, this is the first creek that's made right there. So this isn't an arbitrary point. Like the direction it's heading when it first bounces off this principal resistance, that cat ear, so to speak, is pretty significant, you know? So that direction right there is defining really ultimately like where that range might build out. Because you can see there's a creek jump, sure, but then there's this other kind of floating range or floating creek here that's not really interacting with anything yet. But that typically is where we find that it does. So later, once this breaks out, you can see it's got this triangular section here that would need to have some kind of definitive action to sort of define this little area here. And so that's where the struggle is actually at in terms of that creek, because it's turning up there, but it's trying to like push up and out this way. So in order to kind of make that move, it has to have like that creek cross and the build out. And it reinforced to some degree by the way in which this is built as a potential head and shoulder, but also the way in which this is built on this bottom where this has been traded quite heavily. And you may suggest that, well, I don't really need to trade there again, but you might trade the lower portion of that range, which was largely used as a springboard, and that's like right there. And so there's quite a bit that could be traded like right around that potential zone. So again, it would not surprise me if this was kind of used as the method of delivery, and then ultimately you leave at like 640. And honestly, I have it going like really low, but it'd probably be up here by that point. So this would be like the creek jump, this would be like your SOS, and then you take off. And this would trade pretty low until then. So this first one's going to be nasty, probably be a big sell-off. And then I don't think it goes like significantly farther before coming back down, probably to 10. Yeah, that's if it breaks. Those are the targets I would see. So, well, what else we could do is we could look at that same principle that we talked about earlier, assuming this doesn't go any lower, and that is kind of where it needs to be right here. If that's the halfway point, we'll make that a different color. So the drop here to the halfway point. Yeah, that's the same distance. So we talked about this earlier in the day, but like that is the transition to the new trading range. So like potentially, eventually, I guess you could say that this will, I don't know when, but it will eventually come back to like maybe to 45 if you're lucky. It's possible that if this ends up making a lower low, like I would suggest that if it does make a lower low, this could be down to like $1.60 or something. Like I'd just move this range down. But right now it looks like it's anchoring itself pretty well. So yeah. So maybe in the future it comes back up to 50s long term. Excuse me. So, sorry about that. What I might do is put an alert on this trend, a lower one, and see if it breaks it on earnings, then watch it. Could be a really good long-term trade, especially considering it's at this point of potentially like breaking out, especially that move. That could happen really soon. I just don't think it's going to go significantly lower. Just based on this alone, kind of gives me enough evidence that that might be the case. It's pretty darn close to where it should be. Yeah. That's like right on the dot. So it looks good, man. It looks like a really good potential trade. This is going to be the boring period, though. The final shakeouts. You know, and it could go a little bit earlier than I have it. Like, this definitely could be more indicative of, like, a different kind of top or something, but I really think that's roughly correct. I think it'd be pretty slow. This is where the buy-in really takes place. And the final shakeouts happen. And, you know, if it goes sooner, it goes sooner. But this is a really far off marker. That's why I'm thinking. And actually it's starting to look more like a fuller wave here, isn't it? Maybe. when to. All right. I mean, that one looks pretty good. Otherwise, it's clean. Yeah, there she goes. So AMC not doing too hot this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. I wish it was a better setup for AMC. I really do, but it is what it is. At least for now, we've got some hope if it can make a new bottom that there's a divergence there. That could be pretty strong. I'll try to check later in the day. I'll come back. Maybe I'll check the on balance volume there. This is looking pretty close to what I was expecting. So I don't know if it's going to make another dive, but it did hit that, wicked way up. It might just go right back up. So anyways, I'm liking the way this is looking for AMD. I'm not super confident it's going to go beyond 119 though, so I might add an alert here. Because if it's already overbought or something on like 30-minute time frame, thereabouts, we'll see. I may trade out of it again a little bit. On the hourly, it's kind of climbed. Regardless, here it was like climbing up while this was coming down. Kept trying to go. But I don't really want weakness here either. I want it to kind of be strong. And I think what would be better is to go ahead and do the sideways trading here. So I'm still going to pick this as my range. I guess we'll find out. Yeah, I like this area right around 116 to 117 because of that gap. Makes the most sense. All right. B-hat, not really looking very good. The volume dropped off a cliff going up back to the beginning of this gap here. So, I might be done with it. You know, I'm waiting for something that may not happen right away. I might need a little bit of a chill out before it pushes, and I don't know what that's going to do to... I don't know. I can't imagine, like, the smallest... Yeah, I can't imagine these are even remotely overbought, but after that dive, maybe 3 minute. Yeah, a little bit. So these penny stocks can be very sensitive to... on small time frames, because a lot of people trade them like day traders intraday. They're just like shooting in and out, in and out, in and out kind of stuff on these old trades. So yeah, the 3 minutes actually really top sensitive. It's been reacting really strongly off these tops. This one went really low, but then it didn't buy all the way back up. So it's been constantly churning up today. I think it could be different because of how severe this was. It's so severe. So severe. 6 minutes not overbought. So these did coincide, some of them with the 6 minute. Is there anything else I'm missing here? I should probably be looking at this guy. So that trend may end up being used as a resistance. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's kind of just at a place where it might be ready to take a breather. It's down so far, it's hard to imagine. But I think if it loses this trend, it's hard to imagine just like, oh, why would it need to take a breather? Well, it's just constant buying, right? It needs to take a breather. I wouldn't be surprised if it's right here. There's a lot going on in this little spot, so. Now, I already talked about AMC several times today. I'm not going to go back and talk about it right this second. If it manages to break the creek, it's going to be one heck of a bullish divergence. And it will be rocketing Monday or Tuesday. It just has to jump the creek by the end of the week. So I'm not super concerned about it coming low. We measured it out last week, and it was like 319 or something. The fact that it's making a new low just means that it's a potential sign of weakness. It doesn't mean it's going to capitulate right this second. That would be not impossible, like it could, but I don't necessarily think it's a guarantee just because. And there's plenty of other trades to have happen. Definitely more money to be made in the market. All right, I think I'm done with this one. I want to add it to my watch list maybe, but how do I do this? Might as well. I think it's a potential for some really good moves here. All right. I'm probably going to be finishing up in the next 10 minutes or so. Let's see what we can do here. Yeah, a little bear flag within a bear flag kind of thing. It didn't make a lower low though, so again, maybe it's going to try to hold high. The compression is starting to look a little silly to me on NNOX. I really think it needs to come back up to near 819, but if the reaction takes a long time, it does change a little bit of the dynamic of it, so we'll see. I mean, it's not even close. That 1 hour looks okay. It looks like it's trying to hold the moving average. It certainly could be a situation where it's coming up like an LSPY just to sell back down and try to like knock this price back down. But right now on the hourly, it looks okay. It's not bearish or bullish divergence at all. It's just kind of regular. It's still low. So there's room either way. And then 4 hours really just getting started if you think it's going to go down. I think it's very possible that it's just kind of gearing up. And it needs to come up again maybe to check, but otherwise you would suggest it could continue down. And I mentioned this before, like I did not like the daily 4 hour on this one. It just feels messy. Yeah, it may need to be a longer term kind of retracement back down to the center liquidity here, which could be very low, down to like 6. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to capitulate and go lower, but for now, that could be a very real possibility, especially if these operators had success in driving it up from that point, and it looks like they have. These takeoffs kind of all gear around the same area, right around $6. Boom, 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 boom. So to really go back and test 6, maybe a big part of this. I don't know if I'd call it a throwback, but it would definitely change the target for this diamond if the diamond follows through. So let's go from here to 6. It looks like 28.30. Which is okay. It is the hook value right here, so maybe there's something to that. It's a bit crazy, but that would be the move. I don't think that's significantly different than where it was before. It's slightly lower. So if it can come back to 6 and hold, I think it'll probably break out. This could end up being a lot longer term, though, than I originally thought, if that's the case, because then the actual creek itself, you can kind of avoid it for a long time. I mean, this could go sideways, almost like a handle on the outside of here. Typically, the trajectory in and out are very close to the same. When I did this for AMC in 2022, it was very easy to find that trajectory and then map it backwards, and it worked really, really well. But you kind of had to know where that exit was. So this would have been 63. This is 63.1. This is pretty steep. I can't quite get it. All right, that's good. So this would suggest like over here. But just like AMC, only the initial trajectory on there actually followed through the initial price action target. So yeah, if it goes all the way back to 6, this may only go up to 16.5. Which is starting to look a lot like a consistency with this. Yeah. Like a trend, downtrend target. That would make sense to me. It should, but it also like it makes sense from a point of view of like a diamond, because that's the angle of the diamond as well. So it's like creating like a trend down. I don't know if I'd trade it past here, to be honest, if it does make that move. But it looks like by maybe about May, that could be the setup. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so if it does come all the way back down to 6, I would say that 16.5 seems very likely. It also means that potentially, man, that's really close. But it means that potentially this doesn't actually, the exit trajectory doesn't have to necessarily start here, even though I think this is where it exits diamond. Even though that's accurate, it could be that it starts over here, which changes everything, because it's like, oh, well then it may not take until October, you know. It's hard to say. Looks more accurately that it would start here, but who knows. All right, so for now, NNOX is a little bit of a cruddy situation because it's just like, looks like it could easily still have some serious downside. I'm not convinced it's going to make this jump back up. And if it jumps back down, then it's really like a bearish setup. Even if this pushes here and comes back down. Yeah, it could be like the M cross going downward that way. And yeah, we'll see. I don't know what to do with B-Hat right now. Like I said, it may be in a place where it's ready to take a breather and come through. But if it continues, I think you're going to get a good push here up to like the 4.7s. I'm out of it very soon, regardless. I just wanted to trade a quick scalp today, see what I could get from it. So not a lot, but at least I got something. I'll take it, you know. So it's at 0.0426 right now. I think it had pushed up a little bit higher earlier. I don't know why it's doing this. It's not showing me like my actual cost basis. Oh. Hmm. Oh well. Hmm. Yeah, I think we're just kind of looking at this from a hopeful point of view, but there's also like a serious potential for downside here. It's already like dropped low, so. Mm. Okay. Guys, I think I'm done. Yeah, well, AMC's a bad play for the most part. Like, even if you just bought shares, we talked about this earlier in the day, only people that would be positive right now are people that either averaged down or only bought at the April bottom of last year. Everybody else would be in red. So it's not making big moves to the upside. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not alone. 99% of people would be red on AMC unless you've been trading shorts. So I personally like have made my money back from anything that I lost that was bought for the January of this year. I've already made that money back. So I'm not I'm not saying like that in a bragging way. I'm just saying like if you work hard and you learn how to play the market, you can make money elsewhere. You don't have to just trade AMC. It's better as a long-term play anyways because it probably will long-term come way back up, but short-term it kills people with options and all that stuff. So this is starting to look like it went back up already. I wonder if it double topped. No, it didn't. It still looks like what I thought. It can come up, chill out, and then drop again and try to make another low. All right, y'all. I'll talk to you later. I know it's a short stream today. I got on a little late, but I'm gonna be doing other things, so I gotta get going. And best of luck if you're in these plays. Hope you do well. Kind of nervous about Wolf. I might post a little bit more about that tomorrow, or yeah, for sure when the earnings hit, but maybe before close. Did not talk about MPW, but I sort of expected it was going to head fake here and then try to go back for some kind of a backup. So it's really right about where we thought it was going to be. I already got out. I told you guys I traded out of it around 480. So the rest of this, we'll just see what happens. I don't think it's necessarily over. I just think that that's the first move, and if it's going to make other moves, it's got to break back above 5. So for now, that move is done, and that trade is done. I think that was my big trade for a MPW was just from here to the top, shares only position. Not trading anything else, so still waiting on FANG. I'm in AMD, I'm in NNOX, and I'm in Wolf, but I think of the 3, AMD is definitely the best for sure. I'm also in BHAT, but that doesn't really count. It's just like a little swing today, and I may not even make anything on it. I might scratch if it dumps back through here. So I'm just be like, all right, I'm done. Yeah. Anyways. All right, y'all. I'll talk to you later. Oh, this kept going down, didn't it? Oof. So they're picking that lower. They are picking the lower mark. The operators. I was kind of worried about that. Yep. So that's the lowest one, right there. Bummer. All right. Well, it seems likely then that if it does manage to push, it's probably not going to get too much above 611. Maybe up to like 620s. Yuck. And it's positioning itself really low, so I want to see that reaction soon. Otherwise, that wave is going to be super shallow, not very, very big at all. That's just constant weaknesses. Yeah, we'll see. It hasn't made it yet. I don't think it's... This is the double M right here. I think it's about to go back up, but... That like M, that double M's shaped really low. See how it went down instead of up? That's not good. That crossed down right here. It's kind of bad. Ugh, gross. So these are pretty much out of the question now. Yeah, I would say it could come lower, but it would lose its entirely its upside. So it would be purely just to drop it down so that any kind of reaction doesn't come back above. So it would be like this, to drop it down low. So any kind of reaction doesn't come back above. And that would just be like a bearish walk through. So I hope that doesn't happen. That would really stink. But at least it would be easier to know where it stands going into close. Yeah. Yuck. All right. Well, their B-hat's going now. I look away for half a second. What? What is BHA? B-hat. B-hat. There it goes. All right, guys. I hope you have a good day. Best of luck in the market. We'll talk to you later.